elicits a response. It certainly communicates to us. So next up, I want to introduce Katie Walton-Day, who will be explaining how her project that she's working on is communicating reclamation, mining through art. So let me just give you a brief biography of Katie Walton-Day. She's right behind me. She's a research hydrologist for the USGS in Denver, primarily researching hydrologic and geochemical processes affecting metal mobility in wetlands, streams, soils, and groundwater affected by acid mine drainage and mining processes. So please join me in welcoming Katie Walton-Day.
Thanks, Alex. I'm really happy to be here. This is my first post-COVID live concert. Live conference. It's so exciting. I should be a little more specific about what I mean by art, because it's not at all at the level of all the wonderful installations we just saw. It's really just using visual art. As a scientist, we have to dip our toes into art gradually. So just with that, if you could go to the next slide, please. And the next. So I'm going to have to do what Kate did here too. So first, I'm going to give you some background. What I'm going to talk about today is trying to communicate our science that we're doing on understanding the effects of uranium mining in the Grand Canyon region. You've probably seen some of this in the news, highly controversial. So it's a difficult area to produce science and have the science understood. There's a 20-year moratorium that was imposed by the Department of Interior in 2012. We'll talk about that a little bit, and how the USGS is producing science that will be used in 2032 to decide whether to continue or halt the mining moratorium. Next, please. So the problem is our science being understood? We tend to just communicate with journal articles, maybe not the best venue or medium for this audience. Well, if you do it this, so you're going to leave it like this? Okay. I'll just finish the outline then. So I'm going to show you, our solution is to try and find better, more engaging ways to communicate the science. And I'll give you 3 examples of that. The first is radon graphic / comic / geonarrative, and you'll see what that means as we get there. The second is a USGS fact sheet. And the third is an effort where we're using we're working with social scientists, collaborating with them to better understand the communication process and our audience and how to make the message more understandable. Next slide, please. So the background is that in 2012, the US Department of Interior issued a record of decision that withdrew over 1 million acres of land north and south of the Grand Canyon from new mining and exploration for uranium. And the reason for this mining moratorium was that there were data gaps in the understanding of the effects of uranium mining in that area on the environment. In particular, it's not well understood how the mining affects water quality and quantity. There are concerns about effects of radionuclides on animals and humans and plants. USGS, as part of the Department of Interior, was tasked as the lead science agency to fill these data gaps. And one of the ways we're doing that is working with existing permitted mines that were allowed to continue operations under the moratorium. Next, please. So the study area in the upper left of the slide, you can see the little inset map of northwestern Arizona that has some orange blobs in it. If you move to the right side of the map, those orange blobs are the north, east, and south segregation areas, and those are where the land has been withdrawn from mining and exploration and mine permitting. You can see in the center of the graph, the Grand Canyon National Park runs through the area, hence the concern. And you can see the multiple land holdings in there. The yellow areas are Bureau of Land Management, the green is the Park Service, the orange is multiple Native American tribes. Next, please. So I want to show you what these mines look like and some of the mine features. They have a small footprint. This is a pine nut mine. They're underground mines. They're very rich, small deposits. So they can be mined out. If the price of uranium stays stable, they can be mined out in 5 years and then reclaimed. Next, please. The mines have a head frame next that is used to access the underground workings. Next, please. Next. Detention pond that catches all the runoff from the property, as well as any water that needs to be pumped out of the mine workings. Next, please. Next. A big ore storage pile, you can see it. Gray rock here is uranium ore that's stored at the surface. Next, please. There's waste rock is also stored at the surface. And next, please. There is a peripheral berm. Click one more time, please. You can see the berm that goes all around the outside of the mine yard, and that is to keep water draining into the mine yard and the detention pond rather than running off the property. Next, please. So the problem, next, please. I just sat through 3 hours of your presentations and I didn't catch most of it. Can I have all your PowerPoint slides? This was at a conference where we'd gone to great effort to try and make everything understandable, and we failed miserably. Next, please. After a half-hour webinar where the mining company went into great detail about their reclamation processes and all that they're doing during mining to prevent loss of radionuclides from the property, to keep everything on the property, someone from a non-governmental organization said, well, there are USGS studies that document higher uranium concentrations in soils on mines north of the Grand Canyon. And then there's another study from the 1980s that showed a big flash flood that transported a lot of uranium into the Colorado River. And he was trying to make the point, aren't there some environmental effects of these mines? And if you click one more time, the mining back one, please. The mining company said, he quoted from a USGS report that said, there is no scientific evidence of adverse environmental impacts. So on the one hand, maybe we're hitting the right tone and that both sides are using our data to support their arguments. But on the other hand, it's not really useful. It's not helping the conversation move forward if they're arguing about the results. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through how I would normally present one of our studies at a scientific meeting, and then contrast that with the first product, the radon graphic. Next, please. So radon is a health hazard to biota if it is inhaled. Next, please. And that's primarily because radon gets into the lungs. It's a gas. It's inhaled into your lungs. And very quickly, it decays by radioactive decay into other elements that also continue decaying. And every time an element decays radioactively, it releases energy that damages cells. So that's the main health hazard. Next, please. We installed 2 radon meters and a time-lapse camera, and that white corrugated thing is the radon meter. And then in the background, you can see the head frame with the gray ore pile in front of it. Next, please. So on the left graph, radon at the ore pile is greater than radon on the right graph at the mine vent. So the 2 radon monitors with the ore pile and the mine vent, you can see more color on the left indicates more radon. The y-axis of each graph is the hour of each day, and then across the x-axis is about three weeks worth of individual days. The arrows on that graph indicate the magnitude and direction of wind. So you can see that the windier it is, the less radon we measured. Same thing for rain. Next 2 clicks, please. The physical disturbance of the ore pile, one more click, please, did not affect radon concentrations. You can see in the photo on the lower left, there's a bulldozer on the pile. And so they're frequently out there as they're bringing more ore out. They're moving it around on the pile to keep the pile stable. So a similar graphic at the bottom shows the higher radon concentrations, the same thing you saw above at the ore pile monitor versus the mine vent monitor. And now the little symbols in that graphic are periods of time when the time-lapse camera saw the bulldozers moving around. And you can see there's absolutely no correlation with bulldozer moving around in radon. In fact, it's almost the opposite. But we had thought that when the bulldozers moved around, it might release air that was stored in the pile that would have bursts of radon in it. That doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, so it took us, what, 2-3 minutes to get through that. And some of you are still probably going, what? And so we need to have a better way to communicate this sometime. So next slide. Here's what we're going to look at. Please, yeah. So we created this graphic comic. Go ahead. It combines results from the scientific paper with information, background information about radiation and radon, which I think is pretty helpful. Next, please. There are only 11 panels in this little comic, and the information is conveyed in drawings with headers with minimal words. If you click, yeah, sorry. Oh, it's a geonarrative with scrolling format. So if you're on your computer, it kind of scrolls by, you control the scrolling. It's very visually appealing. All right, next, please. So this is how it starts. I think you might agree that's a lot more engaging than all my garbage on the previous slide. Next, please. So this is the first panel, and these panels kind of tell a story. In a scientific journal article, we're telling a story too, but this takes it to a level where it's a little more engaging because of the pictures, I think. So the top part tells you about the Pine Nut Mine and how much uranium came out of it. 1.4 million pounds, that's nothing to sneeze at. And then down at the bottom, it says that it's been reclaimed. Next, please. But it goes on to say why we did the study. We're worried about radon for these ore piles, harmful to humans and animals that it might be around the mine. Next, please. So then we go into some background information on radon and radiation, and you can see where the parent to daughter drawing shows all these different kinds of energy coming off. And I think that visual is really helpful to help people understand what radioactive decay is doing and why it's bad. But it's very simple. It's just one atom changing from one form to another. And as that happens, energy is released. And then down in the bottom, you can see the energy is zapping a cell. Next, please. So then we go on to actually talk about what we did in the study. And one more, please. And that particular panel is super vertical, so I had to cut it in two to show it to you. But you can see the radon monitor at the left. There's a weather station in the middle there. You can see where the two radon monitors are, the yellow dots at the sort of middle of the left panel and the right of the right panel. And maybe, I don't know, less than 200 words telling the whole setup of the study, whereas in the journal article, it was probably a page. Next, please. And then some of the results very simply conveyed. When there's more ore at the site, there's more radon. When there's less ore at the site, there's less radon. And some other panels that I'm not going to show for time considerations show the effects of wind and rain as well. Next, please. And then it concludes and talks about the reason that we did this was to produce data that others could use, land managers and others, to determine risk to humans and animals that might be near these mine sites. So I hope you agree that that's a little more helpful for the general public than the journal article, and even than my typical science conference presentation. Next, please. So the next effort that we're engaged in is producing a USGS 4-page fact sheet. Next, please. It summarizes about 20 scientific journal articles. Next, please. It uses an art centerfold to depict important aspects of the study area, and some of that art is shown on the right, but we'll look at more in a minute. Next, please. The centerfold is surrounded by 1 to 2 sentence summaries of each of the scientific journal articles. Next, please. Sorry, it will be available in print and online. And the National Park Service, we showed them a preview of it and they said, oh, we're going to want like 1 million copies. Okay, next, please. Go back one, please. So we're using the engaging visuals of this artist to draw the audience in better, to get their attention. And next, please. So that this is the centerfold. This, you'd open this up in pages 2 and 3, the center would have this drawing on it. Next, please. So what Ben did, Ben Siebers is a hydrologic technician. He's not an artist, but he loves to draw. And we had seen some of his work that he'd done for graphic abstracts for journal articles, and he was super interested to work with us on this. So Ben captured a lot of the kind of iconic images of the Grand Canyon that people think of, including the river deep in the gorge, and then some of the iconic megafauna, the animals that live there. So the bighorn sheep. Next, please. The California condor. Those rock formations in the background are very important to the Havasupai tribe. Next, please. This is a depiction of a spring. It looks a lot like Basie's Paradise that anyone who has rafted down the canyon has seen. It's a very iconic flowing spring in the canyon. Next, please. And then down at the bottom, he depicted a lot of sort of action from our studies. So you can see the mine site on the far left. You can see some scientists in hard hats there collecting soil samples. As we move across that zoomed in image on the right, you can see a little bat. We did some bat studies. We've done some macroinvertebrate studies. So just a way of depicting some of what we've done. Next, please. One more, please. So this is a really rough layout of what it would look like. But you can see there are 1 to 2 sentence summaries of different papers. And there are 20 journal articles that we're summarizing here. They're organized by color. So the orange ones are all soil and geology studies, abiotic studies. The green ones are all the biology-based studies. And the blue ones are all the water-based studies. And they're kind of organized under general, some general summary statements as well. Next, please. And we're starting a new effort next, where we're working in collaboration with Eric and Leslie, who are social scientists at Arizona State. We're going to use social science to match our message format to our intended audiences and examine the challenges of communicating this type of science about the Grand Canyon. We'll develop engagement strategy for interested parties and review and synthesize our existing products and use these findings to develop at least one new communication product that will hopefully hit a broader audience than scientific journal articles. But one of the facts of working at USGS is that you have to have those journal articles to back up the science. So this is adding another layer on top of those articles. Next, please. So in summary, I hope I've shown you how we're trying to work within our institutional guidelines, that is needing peer-reviewed publications, to develop products that communicate our results in a different way, in a new way. Next, please. It's important to reach a broad audience and accurately communicate our results, because the greater the understanding of those results, the greater the amount of informed discussion we can have about the results rather than about arguing about the results. No, they said this. No, they said that. Here's what they said. So a little experiment here. We're going to go back and forth between 2 depictions of science. One is our roughed out centerfold. Next, please. And one is just 8 of the front pages of the 20 journal articles. So pretend you're at the optometrist's office. So go back, please. Do you like A or B? Back again, A or B? Okay, good. I'm glad to have your support. Okay, one more slide, please. Just some references. I'd key you into our website where all those journal articles are, but there are also summaries of the work in not quite super science language, but not quite lay language. We're continually working to get it to be more understandable, but the geonarrative is on that site, and there's a separate thing for the geonarrative there as well, and also acknowledge my funding source down at the bottom, the Environmental Health Program at the U.S. Geological Survey. Thank you for your attention.
I got another one. All right, here we go. Is this on? Yes. We do have time for questions. Please, if someone wants to raise their hand, I'm just going to repeat it as well,
Sure.
just so people on Zoom can hear it and everyone else. Yeah. So, Brianna, sorry. Brianna? Yeah, right. Oh, Brianna. Oh, shoot.
Thank you.
Because we have to communicate about where our lifestyle comes from. And my question for you is, it's a little bit of a long story, it's gonna be hard to repeat for the new audience.
All right. So I attended a conference shortly after Gold King spill in Farmington that was heavily attended by the Navajo Nation.
That's where we met.
We have been so many times. Yes.
Yes.
And in that meeting, some of the Navajo people came on stage and said, you know, our language doesn't even have words for milligrams per liter, parts per million, parts per billion, parts per trillion, and discussed presenting those things in an artistic way. One red poppy in a field of white ones or something. But I think that language barrier exists between the scientific community and normal English speakers as well. And so I'm wondering if you've done any work to try to normalize some of the verbiage that scientists might use commonly in the rest of the English-speaking world.
No, that's a great, I think I get where you're going. I mean, not use technical terms, is that what you're saying?
Yes, just because they exist in the language doesn't mean that everyone who speaks the language understands them.
Well, yeah, and I think we're working on that. I mean, we've been reaching out to the Havasupai the whole time and sharing our results with them the whole time. Part of the problem with the mining, similar to the Gold King, is that for the Navajo, one of the things I learned at that Farmington conference was that they didn't care what was in the water in terms of toxicity. They didn't care if that it was non-toxic. The very fact the water looked like it did was almost like rape to them. It was a violation of their cultural sensitivities and their cultural resources. Similarly, some of these mine sites, particularly the Pinyon Plain mine now or formerly called the Canyon Mine that's south of the Grand Canyon, is a very sacred site to the tribes. The very open meadow where the mine occurs is a super sacred site to them. And so they don't care if it's toxic or not. Just the very fact that the mining exists violates their principles. So in that scenario, you can imagine how hard it is to convey our results, because they barely care. There's some of them care, but even if it's not toxic, that's one aspect of it to them. They're certainly worried about, and we're doing studies with them to study how much of the dust from the mine is getting on stage that they collect for their ceremonies. We've done an elk baseline study where we studied metals in tissue of elk collected on the reservation in comparison to elk collected on a farm elk farm in Wisconsin. So we're doing some of those, gathering some of those types of data where they do care, but the bottom line is beyond that for them. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah.
Question here. We met yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
I appreciate your A effort, but I do have a big question.
Okay.
Did you see any changes?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not sure our weather station had that. So, but that's a great question because you might. Yeah, no, that's a good question. We could probably overlay with weather or patterns or something like that. Yeah, good question. The question was, did we see changes in radon with barometric pressure? And we didn't look at that. All right, oh, there you are. Hi, no, I'm blocking this light in my face.
I'm Dave Oliver. I introduced you in 1987 in Tennessee Park.
Oh my God. Hi, Dave, how are you?
Here's a couple of my students.
Oh my gosh.
My question is about science education and using sort of what you've done in this graphic novel concept, maybe, bring middle schoolers into these types of discussions.
Yeah, it's a great, so the question is, that could we use some of these products to bring for educational purposes for younger middle school students, STEM students, I presume, or just anybody? Yeah. Yeah, I think we could. And I think, the more this kind of thing is done, the more, I would hope, maybe I'm being presumptuous, but I think this kind of communication demystifies the science a bit, makes it more approachable for people, because some people, science and math, they gag, they can't handle it. And unfortunately, so many of our issues in society are based in science. And it's really helpful if society understands the issues. So as we educate our young people, the more of them that we can get on board with a basic understanding of these things, the better. Just for informed discussion, not to make more scientists necessarily, but just to make a more informed public.
Yeah, make people understand what to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Katie, we had another question over here. My question was, I understand that the USGS is a government organization, so they're helping to promote this. What buy-in do you think you're getting from the journal companies themselves in terms of nature, science? The opportunities are there for supplemental materials now because everything's online. So are there efforts being made directly with the publishers to encourage this supplemental support?
No, we haven't done anything like that. I mean, our first hurdle is our own internal publications people. And we were really concerned, but so we took the mock-up to them. They went nuts. They loved it. They said, this is what a fact sheet is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be 4 pages of words. It's supposed to be a broad brush overview of what was done. And so far, our internal people like it. Now, we don't have the fact sheet through review yet, but this is not the only USGS geo-narrative, that radon one. There are a lot of geo-narratives out there now, and they take on many different forms. I think ours might be the first one that uses this graphic art form, but a lot of people that I've shown this to have taken the artist's name and are reaching out to her to have her do stuff for them. So I expect to see more. And there are this is not, I mean, a lot of people are working on this. This is not, we're not the only people doing it, but I think it's real promising. Yep.
How do you become a cartoonist for the USGS?
Give me how do you become a cartoonist for the USGS? Well, we don't have any in-house, but we work, case by case contract basis. Give me your contact information. We just found this person. Yeah, we stumbled on Joanna. So, and Ben, like I said, Ben is at the USGS. I expect if he really catches on with people, his time and streams may be limited. He'll be more at his art drawing board. Okay, I think I've taken plenty of time.
Yes, let's thank
Thank you
Katie
very much.
Walton-Day once
Thank you.
again. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Bob Hedden. He's heading up the back. He runs Hedden Environmental, which is an organization that specializes in passive mine water treatment. A lot of his work has been on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, but he has told me firsthand that he travels worldwide, or at least that his company does. He leaves that to his son, I think, nowadays, right, to travel all over the place. I had a great opportunity to meet Bob just last week. He came to Creed. We drove around, we looked at the mines, we took some water samples, and I left my spoon in his car, and he said he was going to bring it to me today, but now he left it in his car. He left it in his car. Anyway, please join me in welcoming Bob Hedden.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. This is my third visit to a Silverton, or now a San Juan, conference. And what I do is I'm a ecologist. For several years, I worked for the Department of the Interior, U.S. Bureau of Mines, studied passive treatment, helped develop some of the preliminary, the stuff about passive treatment. And since 1994, I've had my own business, Hedden Environmental, which is a small company, 6 to 8 people. And all we do is we do mine water assessments and passive treatment, mainly in Pennsylvania, but around the world too. And so what I'm going to do, in the Eastern United States, there have been hundreds of passive treatment systems built for coal mine drainage, for contaminated coal mine drainage. And usually whenever they're constructed, there's always this vision that they will become adopted by the community and become whatever they can become, something special. And many cases that doesn't happen. And what my observation is, if the system doesn't work, it's hard for it to grow into something bigger than a treatment system. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, that form follows function, and lessons I've learned from 2 passive treatment systems in Western Pennsylvania, where what grew out of them was far beyond what we ever thought it could be. So first of all, I want to point out that just because I'm from Pennsylvania doesn't mean we don't have problems like you have. Here's 6 slides. Half are from Colorado, from the San Juans, and half are from Pennsylvania. And if you go to the next slide, please. The one on the top left is a pH 5 discharge in Pennsylvania with 125 iron. The bottom left is a pH 5 discharge in that's the Red and Bonita discharge. It's in Gladstone above Silverton with 110 milligrams per liter iron. The middle one on the top is a iron terrace that's along the road between Silverton and Gladstone, that on one of these conferences I was taken on a USGS field trip to see. And there's an iron terrace on the right in Pennsylvania. And lastly, there on the bottom right is a discharge out of an old coal mine in southwestern PA. You can see from the color that it's iron and aluminum is precipitating. And that one in the middle and the bottom, that is Red Mountain Creek at the Mineral Creek staging area, pH 2.8. So some pretty rough water in both places. Okay, so the theme of my talk, I pulled this quote from a publication by AMD and Art, which 10 years ago, I think AMD and Art would be here, but they don't exist anymore. Okay, they were an East Coast group led by a historian and artist who wanted to relate cultural and artistic principles to AMD treatment. And I think part of the reason they aren't around is because they didn't do the function very well. And so I'm going to give you 2 examples where the function is working and show you what came out of it. Okay, next, please. So the first one is the Wingfield Pine system. This is in southwestern Pennsylvania, it's in Allegheny County near Pittsburgh. And it's owned by the Allegheny Land Trust. They're a very active trust organization in Western Pennsylvania that buys property. They bought a piece of property next to a creek that had on it a very large deep mine discharge. This is coming out of an underground coal mine, 1,300 gallons per minute of flow right there. That's a lot of water. It's alkaline, so that part's not bad, but it has 14 milligrams per liter iron. And so it turned the receiving stream orange. And next one, please. Okay. Okay. Oh, no, we went the wrong way. Yeah, go down. Yeah. So the treatment plan here was it's alkaline. All we need to do is aerate the water and retain it long enough for all the iron to oxidize, form a solid, rust, and precipitate. And that was done that takes aerobic treatment. So we built ponds where we would have that happen. And then we want to follow the ponds with a wetland to polish the water and provide other benefits. And so the other components were that we wanted to have ecological benefits and we wanted to enable public access. This is in a suburb of Pittsburgh, right next to a housing development. And so we wanted to engage people to come in and walk around there and provide educational opportunities. Okay. So the design team here is a fellow by the name of Roy Kranick, who is he at the time was the director of the Allegheny Land Trust. He managed this project. He's a landscape architect, and that's really key here. Then there's me. I'm just the do-it guy, and I'm going to come up with the plan if it can be done. And then Roy brought in Angelo Ciccati, who is an environmental reclamation artist, which, an eco artist. And so Our goals were to treat the water and number two, make it interesting. In our process, which was something that Roy taught me that I had never heard before. If you're a landscape architect, I hear form follows function. It's like LA 101. Well, I hadn't really thought about things like that, but the process was an idea was proposed. Everyone looked to me and said, can we make that work? Well, that worked to treat the water because that was the primary thing. And then once we went back and forth, we would then revise the idea, reject the idea, whatever, and then move forward. But functionality was the key thing on Roy's mind. An example of this. So we have all this water, we need to aerate it. I'm going to, my plan was put it in a trough that spills out into a pond. And that's how we'll get aeration. So we're going down that road. Angelo comes into a meeting, very excited. I've been to New York City last weekend. I saw this beautiful park, which has a brick wall that separates the sidewalk from the park, an old stone wall. And all along the length of that stone wall is a fountain. And it engages you as you walk on the sidewalk, brings you into the park. Why can't we have a fountain? And so it was like, holy crap. Okay, so we talk about it and we finally think it through, and finally I decide, we can have a fountain here. We have to control the iron chemistry. We can do that. We have to control the hydrology. We can do that. And go to the next picture. And that is the influence to the treatment system. It's a very engaging thing. You hear the water before you get to the treatment system. It's on, there's a little hill there. And so this is Angelo's doing. Those are Angelo's trees in the middle. Interestingly, as an artist, he looked at everything from the viewpoint of organic or industrial. And he would walk around the site and look at things and say, this is an organic. And so those dead trees there, we carried those into the site to place them there. If you can see further down, there's big hunks of concrete, which where Angelo decided it was organic, it was industrial. So next slide. So this is just a photo before we built the system. And that is Roy talking on the left to the community was invited in, and we had 3 meetings where the community was invited in. That's me in the green vest. And those, I drag my kids with me. So family is one thing that follows function here. And that's my oldest son on the right. That's my medium son on the left. And the little one there is Sam, who's sitting back here. So you can see that he has grown up. He was probably about 8 then, and he's now 26, I think. Okay, next. Okay, next. So here's the system we designed. One thing that came out of it was that when I did the analysis, I said, we have lots of room here. We can be creative. And so that opened the door, okay, when that was decided. Here you can see our ponds that are followed by the wetland. And the ponds, usually ponds in these systems are just in series, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here, the thought was, well, we could be creative here. And another part of the whole process of teaching the community was we knew we were going to have orange water, and we knew it was going to get better. And usually when you walk through a system designed just serially, you get to the end and you go, geez, there's no more orange water here. It was really orange back there, wasn't it? Yeah, so you walk back. Here, instead of that, we built a system where the water goes into pond 1, then it goes into 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes in around a circle. It goes into almost pieces of a pie in a circle, and then goes into the wetland and goes back and forth in the wetland. The idea and it takes about 40 hours for water to get from the fountain to the out of the system. But depending on where you stand in the system, you can look to your left and see water that's 10 hours out of the fountain, and look to your right and see water that's 30 hours out of the fountain. And you can see visually there's a difference. Okay, so very cool thing, very cool design here. Next, please. And this is what it looks like from the air with, soon after it was built. We got lots of orange water. We actually have, you can see the pie there. This is not the best picture. We actually have times when it's very distinctive how there's much less iron in the lower piece of that pond. It then goes into the wetlands. You can see a little bit of iron in the wetland. Remember, it goes back and forth in the wetland and comes out in the bottom left and is clean. Next, please. So this is is it working? That's the pond in. This is the final discharge out, a very typical photo. Here's the here's the chemistry of the water over 12 years. And what you can see is that the important thing is the iron. The iron goes from 14 milligrams per liter to 0.4. We've got a functional system. So now what happens next? Remember, we've got a whole community. We've got 150,000 people who live within a mile of this site. So one thing that happens if you have a functional system, things grow. Flora follows function. And so that wetland, there's a boardwalk that goes through the wetland, a beautiful meandering boardwalk. And that's a wonderful place. The vegetation changes season to season. It changes year to year. So the flora is a real attraction. Next. All kinds of ecology. The land trust several years ago, they had a bio blitz here, invite in, you know, the reptile people, the mammal people, the amphibian people, the fungus people, all kinds of groups came in here over a 2-week period and did a whole bio blitz and tried to document what was in here. Lots of stuff and growing in here, lots of stuff living in here. Next. Big thing is the birds. You know, we created a wetland habitat and it also, there's upland habitat around here too. Next, please. It's one of the premier bird watching sites in Western Pennsylvania. Here you can see there's the bird watchers keep, I'm not a bird watcher, I love birds, but I'm not going down there and scoping them out. But you can see there's been a lot of birds, 194 different species of birds have been tracked down, have been identified down there. Next. There's stuff goes on down here. Here's the boardwalk to the wetland. This is a day when the local university, Duquesne University, brought out their environmental science program students, and they set up stations and studied things, but the public was also invited in. So people came in and got to talk to the students about what was happening. All kinds of good science going on here. Next. And people, it's open to the public. So people just come here all the time. Whenever I go down there, I find people down there walking around, families, it's a real family place to go to. And that's my wife down there on the bottom left. I had to get a picture of her in here. Okay, next. And they do volunteer activities here, invasive plants. You know, we have in the Eastern United States, we maybe have more problems with invasive plants than you do here, but we got lots of them. So here they are trying to do some control of the undesirable plants there. Next. I ran into somebody riding a bike on the boardwalk. That's okay. People, always joggers in here. Next. Had to show my dog. I'm in Telluride. That's Rosie, the gray dog. That's her friend, Red, who I don't think Rosie really needs to have a functional system. She just likes to look at things. So, okay. Cartoons. I didn't know how important this would be. I go on the internet and search Wingfield Pines and I find a cartoon posted. And so somebody has a young girl, it looks like, has written a cartoon about how much she loves Wingfield Pines. So that's pretty adopted by the community. Next. I'm not sure what's going on here, okay? But I was down there and I took the picture from afar. That's why it's grainy. But this family decided, I'm guessing, what do you think? 1-year-old boy, triplet boys. It's photo time, and they decided to pick Wingfield Pines as the place for their pictures. So, okay. So that's Wingfield Pines. I'm now going to talk to you about the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden, which is a new thing in Pittsburgh. It's the Lotus Garden, Lotus Pond. What this shows in green is this is one of the early plans for the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden, and the gray is all the mining features. This site, they got the site for free from the county, but one reason why it was for free and available is because it was pretty devastated by coal mining activities, underground mining and surface mining. There's acid mine drainage on the site. There were holes, dangerous subsidence holes on the sites. There's high walls and things. So you can see the overlap between the gray and the green, that something had to be, and that's been a real part of the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden, is the concept of reclamation into developing the garden. Next. Well, this is a current map of the garden. And what we're really going to focus, there's all kinds of wonderful things here. If you go to Pittsburgh, spend a day at the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. It's not the Phipps Botanic Garden. This is the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. But what we care about here is that pond down there on the bottom. That is the Lotus Pond. Next. When the designers of the Lotus Pond, the landscape architects who designed the pond, designed it, they said, great, that we saw a great thing. There's a perennial source of water out there. Comes out of this, terracotta pipe. We don't know what that is, but it's nice, clear water. This is going to be great for our pond. Next slide. Except that then I get involved. It's not clear mountain spring water. It's pH 3 water. It's coal mine drainage. This is a drain out of an old underground coal mine, and it has 18 milligrams per liter aluminum, which is gonna counter all the plans for the pond. Plants won't live in that. Animals won't live in that. Next. So we had to fix that. After some early discussions about how to fix that, we talked about chemical treatment. We talked about chemical treatment, which the garden didn't like because that's hazardous. We would have to put up fences, and that's not what the garden is about. So we decided to come up with a plan that would treat it, but make it be a useful, something that we can incorporate into the whole design of the Lotus Pond. And the other thing that came was rules. Don't cut down any tree that we don't have to cut down and fit it into our very tight area. Next. So what we did here, this is different water than the last site. This is acid water, is aluminum. We needed something to neutralize it. We put in a limestone bed. We had to squeeze it in very tightly. You're going to see it took, we had to build a concrete tank. It's a drainable limestone bed, which is a new thing 10 years ago in the East, where you have a bed of limestone, water runs through it, it's full of water, but it's within the, 6 inches from the top of the limestone. It treats the water beautifully, but periodically you have to clean the solids out of it. You do that by opening a gate valve at the bottom and flushing all that water into a sediment pond. And actually, that can work very well at remote sites and here, because you can do that with a solar panel and a very simple electronic controller. Next. So this is it being built. You can see the tank, 20 feet wide, 100 feet long, 5 feet deep. There's limestone getting put in from the beginning. I'm telling the Botanic Garden, okay, so we're going to have this limestone bed. People are going to be able to walk on it. Oh my gosh, we want to make that part of the trail system. We can put the trail right on top of your treatment system. So we think that through. I say, okay, yeah, I think we can do that. Oh, and we don't want to make it a straight trail. We want to make it an interesting trail. So here is what you can see is what gets put on. And there were rules that came with this. We had to put down fabric so that none of the dirt ended up in the limestone. And then they were able to build on top of this, but they understand periodically every 10 years, we're going to need to come here and clean it out. That's okay. And this is the beautiful walkway that they've put on top of the treatment system. Next slide. So does it work? Okay. And it turns out it's worked beautifully. This is what, 8 years worth of data. The water coming in is acid. The thing to look at is the pH. The pH is 3. The water coming out of the limestone bed, DLB, the limestone bed is pH 6.7. The water coming out of the pond is 7. The aluminum, which is the toxic part, is 18 going in, less than 1, less than 1. So we're in good shape. We should be able to support plants and animals in the biology in this pond. Next. And it works, okay? This is the Lotus Garden. This is the Lotus Pond at the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. There's the pond, you can see that. And there's the treatment system. The treatment system is on the right there. You can see the walkway through it, the non-standard walkway that goes through the treatment system, and that discharges water into the pond. And it is the main source of water into the pond. Next. Here's a look just from down at the end of the pond looking forward. It's the Botanic Garden. This is a beautiful site, a beautiful bridge across it. Really spectacular. Eventually, that area on the right is going to be a Japanese garden. They haven't gotten the funding and the support to do that yet, but that is the plan, to have that be a Japanese garden to go with the Lotus Pond. Next. They have planted, this supports, those are lotuses, those large, there's water lilies in there, but the big round leaves are lotus plants, and those are lotus flowers. And so the water, it supports what the garden wanted, which was support plants growing in the water. Next. It also, 3 months after we got the system going, they said, Bob, we're going to stock the pond with fish. I was like, oh no, okay, here we go. Okay. And so they stocked the pond with largemouth bass, trout, minnows, and sunfish. The trout, actually, some herons got in there right away, and I think picked out most of the trout right away. But what you can see here is then several years ago, they brought in a biologist who netted and found those are sunfish in a red bucket. There's my friend George holding a largemouth bass, and they found a snapping turtle in there as well, so that nobody would pick up. So now we have a great site, but also this site gets used. There's a person doing Tai Chi on part of the, on a deck that sticks out into the pond. Every Saturday in the summer and the fall, they have morning yoga on the treatment system, Next. It's the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. It's a beautiful place for weddings. They have a wonderful facility. I think at least half of the wedding photos are taken down here at the Lotus Pond, the group. And here we have a very brave bride and groom who actually walked across the stones that are in the pond that you can walk across for some of their photos. So really just imagine people in 30 years looking at their wedding photos and they'll have forgotten, but they were in a reclamation site when they had their photos taken. Next. There's my dog. Okay, she loves the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. She loves those stones, and it's a good place. Here's a class. They do classes down here. Usually they're like 4th and 5th graders. Here they are sitting on the stones that are next to the treatment system. That's the limestone treatment system. They're being taught about the ecology of the pond, and I hope they're being taught about what's happening with the polluted mine water and how they're actually going to be standing on top of it. About 10 minutes after this, they all get a net, and it's bad days for frogs because they are all on the shore trying to catch everything they can. Next. This is a corporate event that was had. This is a local company that's owned by a Japanese conglomerate, and the folks from Japan were coming in to do some kind of ceremony. They did it here. They did it on the treatment system at the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. Very cool. Next. And when before I came here, I asked the Pittsburgh Botanic Garden, send me a photo that you think represents the Lotus Pond. This is what they said. I think it's it's the whole community. There's the pond. Anyway, you can see it's a wonderful photo, and it shows how family and community have adopted this site. So next. So that's the talk. My take-home message, you can see these sites can be special, but in my mind, they're only special. The ones that are special are ones that work. You got to put your focus on function. You can't cut corners if you're going to build passive treatment systems that you're going to invite the public into. But if you do that, and once you get it right, the possibilities are limitless. Lots of things can happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I can hand off the mic in the room. Yes, right here.
Thank you, Bob. I've got a question about the Lotus Pond, that very deep trench of limestone. Was there a mechanical system to get the water back up from that?
It's all gravity. Everything there is gravity.
Okay, so that was up above the pond.
Yeah, the source of the
draining out
water
the bottom.
came in above the pond, and that's why it was very tight, why we had to build the concrete tank, because we only had about 3 feet to deal with between the source of the water and the pond, at more like 5 feet, and the pond. So we had to squeeze it in there. But all these passive systems are gravity driven.
And no baffles inside of that, just one
No.
straight run.
Just no.
Great. Have you gotten to the 10-year mark where you have to go in and maintenance that? And
No,
what will that look like?
I think we're at 8 years. I think that's going to happen. I mean, the performance is still great, but I'm preparing them for in the next 2 years, we're going to go in there and do some maintenance, and we'll find out then. We'll expect that we're going to have to replace some of the limestone. We'll clean some of the limestone, and I suspect they will redesign the top. I'm positive we're going to have more discussions about how to make that trail interesting again.
Great. What a great project.
Okay.
We've got another question over here.
I know, I always have a question.
Did you have to get MPDS permitting done? And is this subject to regular monitoring?
Well, we had to get, this is both of these sites are abandoned discharges, which in the east means you don't need to do any long-term NPDS permitting. We do, of course, we had to get construction NPDS permits, you know, for ENS controls and stuff like that. But that's one big difference between the east and the west, is that there are hundreds of systems like this. And I got to tell you, I can't remember a meeting I've ever been to where we did the planning, where there was a lawyer sitting there, or there was anybody who said anything about liability. It's just a really different situation. And I don't understand why. But we do have in Pennsylvania a Good Samaritan program, which frees people who provide the land and people who donate services from any liability associated with the construction of the system or its operation. And that's in Pennsylvania. I don't know if that would work federally, but anyway, there you go.
Bob, we have an online question. As the limestone dissolves, is there any localized subsidence?
There will be, but we do not see that yet. And I think that's why in 10 years, in 2 years, when we dig it up, of the 400 tons of limestone we started with, we'll probably have to supplement it with another 50 tons to make up for the dissolved limestone. Yeah. Yes, well, as far as the monitoring goes, I'm the one, I live near here. I live near both those sites. So I'm out there at least once a month and I'm monitoring it. And we have lots of data. We're monitoring the pH and the alkalinity. And the fish are a good indicator of the quality too. What was the first part of the question? No, okay, this is only aluminum. This is where the chemistry matters a lot. There's no iron in here. There's no manganese in here. So all we need to do is remove aluminum. There's no aeration involved in the removal of aluminum, it's just neutralization.
Hey, Bob, this is Marcy, and I've never told you this before, but AMD in art was the inspiration that led me back to graduate school. And I got my LA landscape architecture, and I know there's other LAs in the room that have also followed this project. It's amazing. How do we do more of this? How do we get more projects started that would have this conversation?
Well, I think you should use examples from the coal fields. We've been doing this for 30 years now. And so there is success here. I've come here, this is my third time. I know that you have some different metals here. You have some zinc and some copper. Got to figure that. That part I think can be figured out. I know that I'm standing at 10,000 feet. And in Pennsylvania, I'm standing at 1,000 feet. I understand that there's challenges there. I think one of the steps is to take a chance on taking some of the East Coast technology and applying it to a high elevation, San Juan Mountains, if that's it, somewhere in Colorado, but applying it to a discharge, and make sure though that you design the system to succeed. None of this well, this will make things better. No, not make things better. You want to make the water so clean that it will support ecology and be a proud place to visit. So I think it's time to start taking a chance on taking some of this Eastern stuff that works and testing it here. It's a great table to be at. I learned so much sitting there with those LAs and with Angelo, the artist. Just was amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob. We don't have any more time for questions, so let's thank Bob Hedden again for his wonderful work in the change. And now as I come around, we're going to I wanted to invite Thomas Livingstone to the stage to talk a little bit about his project, his ongoing 7-year endeavor to capture some of the photos that you see here and also in the room below. It's called The Treasures of the San Juans. And so welcome to the stage, Thomas Livingstone.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, it was back in 2012 is when I was up on a Red Mountain Pass, and I didn't really have the idea of a huge project back then. I was actually, it was this time of year and I was shooting fall colors. But what ended up happening is I photographed the Guston house and converted the image into black and white. And later that night, I realized that there was a really big project photographing all of these old historic treasures that are still standing in the San Juan Mountains. So I think it was 8 years later, I finally finished, got to a point where it was like, enough is enough. I photographed. I mean, I could be doing this the rest of my life, but I put my book together and got the big prints going. It came out right before the pandemic hit, so it was kind of a delay until this year. But now we're going to be showing these prints all over Colorado and hopefully all over the United States. So this is a Vimeo promo video. I call it an image reel, but it shows a good portion of what's in the book. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
You can always count on the stunning fall colors that are found throughout the San Juan Mountains of southwestern Colorado. However, for long
Thanks, everybody. Sorry about that. We're just going to be starting in just a few minutes, even for those on Zoom. If you're listening, hold tight just for a second. Thanks for your patience. A few more people are coming back. We'll start in just a second. All right, well, welcome back from the break. We've got one more interesting session that Marcy Bidwell, the Executive Director of Mountain Studies Institute, will talk about. And after that lunch, and I'll give you some details. But for now, I'd like to introduce Marcy Bidwell, who's right behind me from Mountain Studies Institute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. We're so excited about this conference because it brings together some of the best ideas from across the San Juans to share and improve the work that's being done in each of our watersheds. And we are definitely stronger together in that sense. I'm really excited as well for to be representing the Animas watershed and the Mancos watershed and the San Juan on our side of the world as a part of this, because there's been a lot of really good work and partnerships that have been really unique to the region, and we're really excited here to talk about one of those initiatives that really brought forward a tradition and an interest in innovation that the Animas River Stakeholders Group started years and years ago, when there was first pressure in the Animas to turn it into a Superfund site. The community said, no, we want to try this, we can do better. And so they worked together for years to do as much as they could to clean things up. And they eventually came up against a really hard rock wall. And it actually was a water wall where it got impossible to move forward. And so they really started to look into innovative techniques and technologies and started the first innocentive challenge to try and bring forward new ideas. As we move forward in time, that tradition is being brought forward by a brand new partnership, which I'm really excited to represent today as the Mining and Water Solutions Bootcamp. We started the San Juan Mining and Reclamation Conference in 2011. The Uncompahgre Watershed Partnership and Mountain Studies Institute had a very aspiring young Vista who put 50 people together in the basement of a church with a projector and started the conversation. And here we are 11 years later, celebrating that tradition. Along the way, we created the Silverton, we created a lot of conversations about innovation, and it grew to the point that we had a spin-off event, the Silverton Innovation Expo. And what we realized through those conversations is that we need to increase the full ecosystem to support these solutions coming forward. We need to have the businesses, the agencies, the end users, and the communities all in the room in order to help move that forward. And that's what became the impetus for the Mining and Water Solutions Bootcamp. And so for the starting in December, we had our first cohort. Mountain Studies Institute is partnering with Newmont and the Telluride Venture Network to create what has become a cohort of businesses each year that are focused on mining and reclamation technologies. And Devin Hornvet, who's here with us in the audience today, and Julie Penner, who I'm about to invite on stage, are my cohorts and my fellow conspirers on this effort. And we are really excited to say that we now have a total of 11 companies that have come forward in our 2 boot camps, and we have 5 of them on stage today. Where COVID has its downsides, 100%. Our first boot camp was virtual out of necessity, and what that enabled was us to reach a much wider audience. And so we're proud to report that so far we've had 2 Canadian companies, 1 French company, and 8 US companies that represent Hawaii, Ohio, New York, Colorado, and West Slope in particular, Massachusetts and California. We're looking for technologies that can be applied here on the ground, and that we can use our interest in innovating and our support from the community to take that step forward, to push for helping clean up our sites while we're also advancing the technology for the industry and for the world. And with that, we have a very exciting announcement to make that DISA, which is a company that uses disassociation process. It spins things really fast to separate uranium from tailings, has been fully funded, and their funding will be used to clean up a uranium site here in San Miguel County as part of their proof of concept in going to market. And so we're really excited about that announcement. And so with that, the last slide real quick to tell you how this is going to go. We're going to invite 4 companies on stage. Unfortunately, Genomines from France was not able to get a visa in time to join us for this, this boot camp here this week. And so we'll have a total of 4 companies presenting today. As we go through the presentations, you can text questions for your Q&A to Julie, who at 406-202-4862, and this number will be up in between each of the different presentations. So with that, I would like to introduce Julie Penner, entrepreneur in large, entrepreneur in residence. She is bigger than life, Burning Man, bigger than life. She's wonderful. She's in her element here in Telluride. She has brought over 100 startup companies across the Valley of Death, and has worked for Techstars, and is now an amazing contribution to Telluride Venture Network.
Thank you, Marcy. And I know you're all here to listen to the company, so I'll be back up for Q&A. And with that, I'll hand it over to Craig from Copperstone Technology.
Tailing storage facilities represent massive liabilities, risks, and costs to mining operators. Until now, I'm Craig Milne, CEO of Copperstone Technologies in Edmonton, Canada. We make an amphibious, heavy haul robot that's capable of accessing tailing storage facilities. Thank you. Capable of accessing all types of tailing storage facilities. This tailings pond in particular is a base metal mine in Canada. It's several square miles, and it's accessible mostly by helicopter, which represents a significant problem for our client in that they can't do sampling, they can't do any deep work in the tailings, and they can't do any geotechnical investigations, which require a push force. So what's going on in these videos? If you can go to the next slide, please. Copperstone has developed a series of amphibious robots, all based upon this screw drive propulsion system that we've developed. And what that allows us to do is to float on water, crawl through mud, crawl across hard ground, rocks, anything that might be in a tailings facility. And then we build robots in different sizes. So a small robot for us is about 800 pounds, and we can do lots of water-based work. The intermediate size robot there is about 2,000 pounds. And then we're developing one right now that'll be about 8 tons in size. So that's about the size of a dump truck, just for scale. Go to the next slide, please. And so our robots are designed to help our clients do all the necessary work on a tailings pond that they typically do today, but we remove the human element. So typically human operators have to go out onto tailings, and that's high risk, high cost. And that limits a lot of the measurements and monitoring that clients need to do. And in some cases, it prevents it entirely. They can't access tailings, like in that example with the helicopter. So our robots, we can instrument them with different payloads, lots of water-based work. So sonar gear to do bathymetric surveys, water sampling, in situ characterization, as well as heavier geotechnical work like CPT and vein shear. We've also done some really cool things you might be interested in for the reclamation purposes here is we've even done some tree planting from our robots. So planted trees in a tailings pond to assist with dewatering using the natural vegetation. And we've got lots of cool applications coming down the pipe. Go to the next slide, please. So we try and make it as easy as possible for our clients to work with us. Robots can be kind of complicated. So what we do is we offer our robots as a service. We have a field team that's fully trained. We go out to site. We can deploy robots worldwide. And then we do projects for clients. And then there's no risk to our client at all. That's, we're trying to minimize that. And so we come out to site and we're able to perform the data or perform the sample collections or data management for them, and then offer that to our clients. Next slide, please. So we work with a number of global mining companies. We're hoping to grow that list substantially. Go to the next slide, please. But what we notice is that once clients try us and they recognize the significant benefits that they can achieve using robotic-based sampling and data collection, that they don't really go back. The cost savings, the safety profile, and just the ease of using robots is a substantial benefit. This client, for example, we've done 3 separate projects with them, and every time the scope of work is doubled. The latest project we've done with them is this, you can see here, this tailings pond is several miles across, so very large. It's a CPT and sampling campaign. We've saved the client several $100,000 in this one campaign here. And most of that saving comes through, we don't need any safety gear. We don't need rig mats. We don't need contractors to support our operations. We just need 2 people, a pickup truck, and our robot, and we can go. Go to the next slide, please. But we can't do it alone. And part of what we're here in Colorado to do and to learn here is to get some help from folks like yourselves. We need introductions to more mining operators so that they're aware of what we can do and how we can help them. We're also beginning a round of raising capital so that we can scale up faster as a business. And so if you know any investors that would maybe be interested in having a conversation about what that would look like on our business end, that would be very helpful if you could make some introductions with us. We're also interested in discussing with mining operators from the ESG perspective, not just at the base operations where we can save them money, but really, using robots to reduce risks and liabilities in their company has an optics that we think is a significant benefit for the client as well. And then we're always looking to integrate different sensors and work with other partners that way as well. Next slide. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions you may have for me now.
Thank you, Craig. I love that video at the beginning. What cool technology. First question from the audience. Have you ever had a robot get stuck or lost?
Have we ever had a robot get stuck or lost? You know what, we have, and we're actually quite proud of that. We always think it's better to get a robot stuck than a human. Some of the tailings facilities that we do work in, there have been fatalities. We have always been able to pull a robot out. Typically what we do is we have multiple robots. So we come out with a second robot and use that as a rescue vehicle, essentially. But being stuck just shows the very, very difficult nature of the terrain that we operate in.
Next question from the audience. Do you have any plans for a smaller underground capable robot?
Actually, I just got an email about that this morning. It's funny. But yes, there's lots of interest in being able to go in lots of different locations. We do have a small project on the go right now, creating basically a robot for tunnels, sewer tunnels, sorry. Means something different in the mining industry, but for us, that sewer capable robot would also be very interesting for tunnel crawling in the mining industry and being able to traverse all sorts of terrain, whether it be water or rocks that might be in a tunnel. So yes.
Question from the audience, how are they powered?
All of our robots are electric powered. So we use lithium polymer batteries and then typically an electric drive. As we get into larger scale robots, we moved into hydraulic power, but the generation of the power comes from batteries and electricity so that we can maintain a green profile. And that's just the direction that everybody wants to move. So electricity is the way.
Great. And I got a question about his fundraising round, and I'm going to leave that for offline. Thanks, Greg. Everybody give him a hand.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, perfect. You all got how this works. You can save my number and you can text me anytime during the next presentation. Next up, I'd like to invite Tracy from Avivid Water.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Tracy Kessner, and I'm with Avivid Water Technology from Longmont, Colorado, where we are putting a new spin on water treatment. You may be familiar with this location. Sorry, I'll get closer. You may be familiar with this location. This is where we went with Kay Zillick from the BLM to go take water samples from the American tunnel, where we then treated it. And that water in that brilliant shade of orange. We then change it from tang to clear water. And then the amount of sludge that we produce is 70% less than typical chemical treatment. All of the suspended solids, the dissolved minerals are all then in our sludge, which is then available for recovery, potentially making your water treatment pay for itself. But how effective is our treatment? It is incredibly effective. We've been to the American Tunnel, we've been to the Argo Mine, Tip Top, Bunker Hill, many other locations around the US, many different mine waters and other waters as well. We've had fantastic recovery rates. And as I mentioned earlier, since it's a heavy metal sludge, it's completely available for recovery from additional technologies, which you'll learn about later. How do we do it? Is with our reactor referred to as turbocoag. We pull all of the metals out of the water, base, platinum group minerals, rare earth elements, things like arsenic, phosphates, and the like. We do it in a single step. It is then available for recovery and turning what would be a waste product then into potentially a value add. We also are able to kill all of the microbes that are within that water as well, making it safe and stable for release. You may have come under the sinking suspicion that I'm referring to electrocoagulation, and you would be correct. However, before your stomach sinks too low, let me assure you that we have solved the problems that have plagued electrocoagulation since the 1800s. We have solved the problem of passivation, which is that middle section where the anodes themselves are coated with an impenetrable coating and with sludge buildup within the system. And we do that with our Tesla pump. So this is a triple patented system where we have our replaceable anode cartridge. The anodes themselves start off as 3/4 of an inch, 36 inches wide, and then they are dissolved. So they're sacrificial anodes. They're dissolved over the course of the runtime that it's in there, and it can be anywhere from 30 days to 6 months, depending on how complicated your water is and how hard the treatment needs to be. And then you'll notice the image next to it. What you can't see anymore are the anodes, because they become essentially the thickness of a business card when we're done dissolving them. And you'll note the inside of this reactor is squeaky clean. So no internal sludge buildup, super easy to maintain. So it'll run, like I said, for as long as you need it to. We scale up very easily. You can put several machines in a row in a daisy chain to increase the amount of flow through that you get. We can be skid mounted, we can be trailer mounted, we can be mounted on the floor inside a building. And we have a small pilot footprint. It's one of the things we're happy about. We can mobilize and demobilize very quickly. So the reactors, I like to refer to it as essentially a very large refrigerator. You wouldn't want to have to lift it at several thousand pounds. And we will run between 50 and 200 gallons per minute, depending on the complexity of the water. So for us, mine water is actually very easy for us to treat. We were originally created to treat mine water. And then, as you may have figured out, we are not the whole process, but we are a significant part of the process. So we'd gather the water, put it into a holding tank, because we can't just take it from the river. Goes through our system. We do some additional balancing to it in case it needs some pH adjustment. And then at the end, after dewatering and separation, then it is ready for metals recovery. So I'm here mostly to learn, but also significantly to talk with investors and with mine owners and with complementary technologies, because as I mentioned before, we can't do it on our own. Being able, though, to take what would be a waste resource and turn it into a positive benefit for the company is something that I'm very excited about. And I hope that you are too. Thank you. Let's see if I can get out of my own way here. Tracy, question from the audience. Let's talk about the maintenance. How easy is it to maintain? What do you have to do there?
So we went through multiple iterations. This is our 5th generation system. We are market ready. It is very easy to maintain. We made it so that it's a clamshell and you pop the top off, you lift the entire anode cartridge out, and then you replace it. It takes about an hour and a half.
Great. Next question from the audience. Does it require full-time oversight, or can you run it on its own and walk away?
So in the beginning, we would plan for the initial burn-in phase, that we would have someone that would be monitoring it, but it's set up to be automated so that everything can be controlled remotely, so you can monitor it remotely. And it is supposed to be as user-friendly as possible. Plug and play, plug in your water lines, plug in your power lines, plug out your outlet water.
Does it replace reverse osmosis?
We do not, but we cannot remove salts from the water. But what we do remove actually are all of the heavy metals, all of the base metals, all of the as I mentioned earlier, the platinum metal groups, and things like arsenic and fluoride. So we are, however, a fantastic precursor to reverse osmosis, because by putting us in front, we clean up the water significantly so that your reverse osmosis system lasts longer. You don't have to back flush it or replace the membranes near as often.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next up, we have Ben from Intersphere. Give him a hand.
Thank you. So this is a beautiful image of Earth, right? But that's not all it is. So climate scientists have found that if you look at images like this, which was from a few months ago, and compare it to a similar image from a few decades ago, you can actually identify subtle patterns of climate change. So one of the key ways that people are proposing to actually combat this climate change is through renewable energy. So people have said you can use wind turbines, electric vehicles, and solar power. But a key aspect to that is that we need to extract a lot of ore in order to actually produce those materials to combat climate change, right? So mining itself is critical to combating climate change. But one of the key issues there is that climate change is actually impacting weather and climate patterns that feed back onto mining. So like this is an example of a dam that has been significantly impacted by drought in California. And we're seeing these more extreme weather patterns all across the world, right? So extreme weather and extreme climate events can impact mining, but mining is essential for mitigating the impacts of climate change. So it's this feedback. So this isn't just my take. Mining.com says that environmental, social, and governance is the biggest risk in the mining industry. So understanding how mining operations are impacted by climate change is a huge part of that. And a report from McKinsey & Company actually found that forecasts of climate change-induced changes to extreme weather are going to impact how mining operators, I guess, have to operate, right? So you have an impact on the investment timescale, and then you also have an impact on the operating timescale. So that's why I'm here. So I'm the founder of Intersphere, and we focus on providing weather and climate analytics so that people can reduce their risk for these weather and climate events facing their companies. So to summarize the company in 2 sentences, we focus on being able to give you information about weather and climate from the next minute through the next few decades, and we can do that anywhere on Earth. So that's a big mission, right? And it sounds like pretty grand in scale, but our science is funded by the National Science Foundation. So the products that we build are actually based on, true peer-reviewed science. And we're also partnered with a fairly large hydro and mining-based consulting company to make sure that the forecasts we're creating can actually be used and have meaning for the mining industry. So how we do this is, if you're looking at a forecast from today to say 1 week, you can actually forecast specific extreme events. So if you're looking at a flood or an extreme snowfall event, something like that, that could actually lead to significant risk for your assets, safety, things like that. So an example here is impacts on tailings infrastructure from an extreme flooding event, like a 1 in 100-year event. That's the type of forecast you get there. And the next step is from the 1 week to 1 decade horizon. You can't say which event is going to happen on any specific day, right? Because of the chaos of the atmosphere. What you can get out is information about, whether specific time periods will be more extreme than what you've seen in the past. So we can give you forecasts for saying next summer, you'll see more extreme drought than you have seen in the past, more extreme flooding, things like that. So that helps you plan your operations. And then on the last time scale, this is the actual climate change time scale, so 1 decade and beyond. It's looking at if you were able to prepare for extreme weather events, extreme climate events today, climate change is going to change those. So they might become less extreme or more extreme, and we help you understand how that's going to play out for investment and then long-term viability planning. So yeah, so now you know generally about what I do. I'm here to learn. So as you can tell, I come from the weather and climate background, and we're tuning our products to make sure that people in the mining industry can actually use our forecasts. So what I'm asking from you is that if you have any insights into how weather and climate are impacting your operations, I'd really appreciate that information. Or if you want to talk about the science of climate change and things like that, I'm open to talking about that too. So yeah, again, I'm here with Intersphere. There's my contact information. Thanks, and I'll take any questions.
Great, thank you, Ben. Can you tell us a little more about what data you actually provide to your customers? Like, what does that look like?
Sure, yeah. So like this first customer that we're working with, they take the data that we use and they put it in a very comprehensive risk package for mining companies. So what they do is they access our servers directly. And so it's called an API, and they collect our data, and then their engineers translate that information to that company. So what that company is actually interested in is essentially water resource management. So if they work in an environment where it's a very wet season, very dry season, so it changes how long they can operate, because they're actually trying to clean up some tailings facilities. And so that's critical for when they're actually employing people to do that type of thing.
So it sounds like you're talking a little bit about the reclamation side. A question from the audience. Can you talk about any reclamation strategies that this might apply to specifically, or do you have any reclamation projects you're working on?
Yeah, so I can't say the specific reclamation projects that we're working on, but the main way that this has been helping reclamation is for people understanding like the time window during the year which they can actually operate. So this company that we're working with, they are trying to extract tailings because it led to an environmental hazard, and it was contaminating water supplies for people downstream, and they can only operate in a certain period of time because they're in a really rainy region of the world. So they can essentially take our information and say, okay, normally we would have this really strict timeline for when we can operate each year, but we can extend that by a month, or we have to shrink that by a month, things like that.
Great. One more question. Can you talk about any other forecasts and how you are different? Like how does your product compare to other forecasts that people might have access to?
Sure, yeah. So 2 quick things there. One of them is on that 1 week to 10 years horizon. A lot of our NSF funded research was actually developing the technology to be able to make forecasts in those timescales because people haven't really figured it out too well. So the ability to go from next minute through next few decades and not have to source your data from different people is a big advantage. And so we compare our forecasts to National Weather Service and things like that on the shorter timescales, and our forecasts are more accurate because we essentially take these generic forecasts and hone them in on very specific target variables that you're interested in. So it's not generic, it's very specific for what you want.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
All right, thank you.
And our last company today that is presenting is Phoenix Tailing, and I'll have Nick come up and give you a presentation.
Thanks so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Myers, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Phoenix Tailings. So the first thing you need to know about Phoenix, we weren't built like most other deep technology companies, where we built this core piece of technology in a lab and are now trying to commercialize it. We saw one of the biggest challenges in the world and said, we need to solve this. So we actually built our first prototype in a backyard in Cambridge, Massachusetts, processing some tailings and pulling out a little bit of iron and a little bit of rare earth oxide concentrate. Well, we've come a long way since then, but we have a long way to go. And it's this belief that if we bring together the right people, we can solve any problem in the world. And the problem that we focused in on is that problem of waste in the mining and metals industry. There's over 173 billion metric tons of waste produced every single year in the mining industry. That's enough to cover the entire state of California in a foot deep of sludge every single year, plus 7% of the world's carbon emissions. And those tailings are stored in these massive landfills that are not only a liability for the mine owners, but also for the environment and for society in general. And this industry is one of the most essential on the planet, and we need it to keep moving. So Phoenix, we're here to change that. And we saw all the valuable material being thrown away in these tailings. So let's harvest this material to allow us to economically eliminate that waste and finally make mining truly clean and sustainable all the way through. So our technology is fairly simple. We take tailings, use our modular platform that allows us to process not just one site, but be able to rapidly scale and easily customize to many different sites, whether it's iron ore, bauxite residue, PGM tailings, and et cetera. That modularity allows us to scale. We have a closed loop process to make sure that we're not damaging the environment any further, and we're making sure we're cleaning it up along the way. And we have a low energy system that allows us to maintain economics the entire way through. And lastly, of course, with zero direct carbon emissions in the process, because that's what the end folks buying those metals are looking for. The how we do this actually gets a bit more complex. We're bringing together 3 different types of material science and combining it to access that value. First being hydrometallurgy. This is just basic water-based chemistry, processing the initial tailings themselves and separating it out into individual concentrates. This is traditional mining technology here. We're just customizing it a little bit to fit with the small particle sizes and heterogeneous mixtures that you see in tailings ponds. Now, once we have that concentrate, we separate that into those individual constituents within, breaking up that mineral structure along the way. And that's where we start to bring in our true IP here. That last stage that we focus in on is that's our true innovation. And we take those individual constituents, whether they're oxides or chlorides or whatever it might be, and convert that to the final end metal products. And this is our trade secret technology we've developed in-house to actually access this entire value of materials. So what's really important here to focus in on is that rare earth supply chain in particular. So we don't just make the rare earth concentrates like you see in Mountain Pass out in California. We actually take that concentrate, separate individual oxides, and convert to the final end metals and metal alloys that manufacturers of the magnets for electric vehicles or renewable energy need, allowing us to encompass that entire supply chain, which is currently controlled in China today, and access this economically. And we're one of the only players in the entire US that can do that. So we've come a long way, I think, since the backyard. Still a long way to go, of course, but we've actually worked with a number of players all over the world, from both accessing the tailings and understanding what's there to solve the challenge for the mining owners and refinery owners, as well as actual buyers of those end metal products. And while we're still at lab scale, we've actually had a fair bit of success here, and we're very excited. But we do have a long way to go, and we need your help. Right? Hiring is one of the biggest things we're focused in on right now. We want to bring together the smartest, the best, the brightest, the most passionate people to help us change the world. And we need your help. We're looking for the top players. Please reach out. We would love to talk to them. We're also looking to talk with all the stakeholders, the mining operators, the regulators, et cetera, because we do truly want to solve this problem for everyone, because it's a holistic challenge. And please reach out. We would really love to chat with you. We have a long way to go, but it's with folks like yourselves, the most passionate, the innovative, the game-changing people. Together, we can solve this problem. So thank you so much. Please reach out.
Thank you very much, Nick. First question from the audience is, how much are you processing today and what's the state of the technology?
That's a really great question. And so for clarity, because it's all time, we're still lab scale, right? So we're processing maybe a few kilos. I think we did a 45 kilogram test batch the other day, but it's really proving those economics work consistently. And we've gotten the technology to a point where it's consistently operating in the lab, and we're doing an evaluation on where we should build our first on-site pilot sites. So that's what we're doing over the next 18 months after we raised our last financing round, going out, talking to folks in Colorado, talking with folks in South Africa or India or wherever it is, to understand exactly what the challenge of the tailings there are, what they have issues with, what the chemical compositions are, and how we could build a pilot site there to solve that challenge and show the technology can demonstrably grow and scale effectively.
Great. Here's a question with an acronym I'm not familiar with, so good luck. Are your byproducts subject to RCRA disposal? And how does that disposal affect your cost?
Yeah, so as of not now, our byproduct is basically a silica aluminum mix, which is just sand. So, but I will say that this is a lab scale test still. So we have a lot of work to really do to understand that and make sure it's truly safe and not subject to any of the major challenges that you'd see. So that's one of the discussions that we're ongoing still, of course.
If you can talk about it, do you see any use from the DoD as an end user?
Yeah, I talk about it. Yeah, so yes, yes, we do. We do have funding from the Air Force right now. So we produce rare earth metals, specifically ferrodysprosium, dysprosium iron alloy, that's used in magnets. So the F-35 in particular uses 900 pounds of rare earth metals in its production. 97% of that supply controlled by China. As you can imagine, for the DoD, that's a bit of a challenge. So we do work with them now. We're definitely looking to expand that. If anyone has an insight on how to navigate the DoD, we would love that.
How much energy does your system require? And how do you think about remote sites in that energy requirement?
Yeah, so we're working on this. This is a question we get a fair bit, and you have to break it out into the individual modules themselves, right? So the hydrometallurgical stage doesn't really require that much energy. It's water-based processing, right? But the electrochemical stage, yeah, it's a smelter, right? So it requires smelter level energy. We're relatively low energy, right? We're about a third of a cost of a normal smelter doing this type of thing, but it's still energy intensive, right? So right now our focus is to do the hydrometallurgy on site as well as the solvent metallurgy to get out those individual oxides or chlorides that we need. And then for the specialty products like the rare earth metals, when we want to turn those into the actual metals and metal alloys, we have a central location to handle that actual production of those metals. Right now, we're building the 1 metric ton a month ferrodysprosium production facility in Woburn, Massachusetts, taking oxides that are from the market, converting those to metals economically with no waste, if you're familiar with the process. It's pretty exciting.
Awesome. And then I can't resist, because it's so interesting to have so many job openings from a startup. I love startups. I think they're high energy and really at the forefront of technology. Can you tell me a little more about the job openings you have, just at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing one should know when we talk about job openings, like we're really looking for the most passionate, innovative people. And a lot of times we'll customize roles for them because that's the best thing for us. We're looking at people first and then the specific functions afterwards because we have a lot to do. In general, the high level roles though, we're looking for metallurgists to help us on those hydrometallurgy stages. That's definitely not our core expertise. We're really good on that electrochemistry stage, but the hydrometallurgy, that's traditional. Themselves, because that's where we make our money. Helping us understand that market, getting in touch with the right people and navigating that. That'll be very helpful for us.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. My hand.
Thanks, everyone.
So just to wrap up, these companies will be hanging out here. They'll mingle a little bit as we sort of transition into lunch. Please engage them. They came from as far away as Boston and Edmonton to be here with you. And so please follow up with them. Ask some questions, helpful if you can. And any of you who ask questions that we didn't get to, I'll try to get the founders to follow up with you to get your questions answered. And thank you very much. I'll hand it back to Marcy.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and seeing some of the bright futures that are coming in to address this problem and join us in pushing some rocks uphill. I wanted to also say, if you want to talk about future boot camps or needs for technology or places where we should be really pushing to find a better way, a better idea, or bring something to fruition, please feel free to pull Julie, myself, or Devin aside as well over the next couple of hours. We'd love to talk about it. We are planning on the next boot camp for 2022, and we're looking for good companies and good people to be a part of that. You can get involved by either being a mentor, by bringing a company forward, by passing us on to some of your friends, or if you know anyone who's investing in this space. Like we said, we want the whole ecosystem so that we can actually help move some of these things forward. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it back to Alex.
Thanks, Marcy. Thanks again to the boot camp as well for coming this long way and sharing those ideas. Yeah, please do engage. And now, as you guessed, it's lunchtime. We have quite a bit of time because we know it's Telluride. And so please come back at